Hello, guys. Welcome you all. Hello, Lucy. Thank you for being here. Thank you for giving us this chance. So sort of to start with, we are going to be muting everyone. You can unmute yourself. We're going to allow you to unmute yourselves. And we're going to try for you to, during the session, we ask everyone to make questions related to the topic that is being talked about, and to keep different questions for the Q&A at the end. Preferably, obviously, looking to for this question to guide us and to increase our presence in productions to better opportunities, and you know, so that most people can take advantage of your questions. So feel free to ask them at the end during the okay, yeah. So this is our very first event organized as part of our launching strategy to introduce a database of 2 casting directors and 2 industry creatives, and to start a conversation about how to try and reach better opportunities and representation within the performing arts. Hopefully, hopefully Lucy has the ultimate tip to be the next Harry Potter with a Latin American background. And then also, I would like to introduce the team behind the Latinx Actors UK. Alvaro, he's an actor musician, Alvaro Flores. Also, Victor Rios, he's founder of Film Locos. And then Sami Atala, who is founder, member of Untitled Collective and curator of the Latin American season at the Actors Center. And myself, I'm Giancarlo, and I'm an actor. So to introduce Lucy, she has cast over 100 productions, either as lead casting director or as a Spanish or European casting director for international co-productions. She has highly efficient casting offices in Barcelona and Madrid, Spain, and is ideally set up to cast for both international and local casts. She was on the board of CSA Europe for 2 years and was the head of Diversity and Inclusion Committee in Europe. Clients include Netflix, Fox, Paramount, ABC, Disney, NBC, Media Pro, as well as numerous Spanish independent producers. Films she has cast have won over 200 awards at international film festivals, and Lucy is a member of the CSA and ICDN and the ATC. So thank you very much, Lucy, for accepting our invitation and to be our very first guest. And we would like you to say hi to everyone, and to talk about maybe the Business Blueprint online course, if you want to talk about that.
I could talk about that at the end. I really, it's such a privilege to be here. It's great to see so many familiar faces. Some of you I know, some of you I've cast, some of you've done courses with me, and you know, and some of you I've known for a very, very, very long time. And I can remember seeing you in castings like Alvaro, like 12 years ago or something. So I think one of the things, I mean, I feel highly privileged to be the first speaker. I think this is such a great idea. I think it's the perfect time. It's what I was talking to the team before we started. I really believe in the power of collectivity, which is, you know, why I'm a member of the CSA, the Casting Society of America, and the ICDN, because together we are stronger. And then you guys are in the same, you know, you have a very you have similar stories, you have similar aims. So it's very good that you work together and that you share knowledge and you pool resources. It's not about being competitors with each other, it's about pooling resources. And that's something that we talk about a lot in business at the moment, about instead of treating people as your competitors, you treat them as your co-competitors. And you guys are co-competitors. So the more you work together, the better and the stronger you will be. I think it's a very exciting time in Europe for audiovisual. I think things are complicated and they will be complicated for a while. I think it's particularly complicated for many of you being in the United Kingdom at the moment because of Brexit, which makes it more difficult to travel and to work abroad. But most of you have already done that. So it's just another step. It's like me, you know, people go on, oh, it's going to be more difficult. I'm like, done it. I've moved countries once. I've adapted. I've changed. You guys are probably very adaptable, very changeable. You know what it's like to start again in a new country. So it's about applying those skills to this new time, which is, for many of us, it's starting again. You have to learn how to do things online. You have to open new doors, access new opportunities. reach out. And I think it's very much, it is a time for reaching out. The thing that I think that I will say about to actors whenever I get the opportunity, and for me, can I start by saying that, John?
Yeah, definitely, yes, yeah.
I think the first thing that I say to actors at any available opportunity is to remember that you are not job seekers. You are service providers. You belong in the industry. You're extremely important part of the industry. And when you're coming to meet a casting director or a director or a producer, you are offering a service, which is your craft, your talent, your art. You are not coming asking for a job. And I think that's a very important change that, that will make. The word casting comes from an ancient Norse word, which means to cast, which is to throw out a line. And that's what we do in the industry. We are actively seeking actors for our productions. That's what I do. I cast. You don't. You act. And the sooner people stop thinking of themselves as looking, I think, and one of the problems that we have in Spain is that they have translated the word cast to prueba, test. And it's not a test. It's a trial, if you like, to see if you fit. It's a working together to see who the best person for the role is. But it's not about you coming to do a job interview. And when you're asked for a casting, to come to a casting, you're invited to a casting, we use the word you are invited to come because you're being invited to collaborate. So it's a very different dynamic. And I know that there is an imbalance of power in our industry. The imbalance of power is due to many different things, but mainly due to that there are always more actors than there are roles. So it's a business problem of supply and demand. There is also a problem in the industry about the stories that we tell, the narratives that we tell. I believe that this is just to explain from where I'm coming from. I believe that one of the main problems is because of the world history. The film industry was developing extremely well across Europe at the beginning of the last century. But then we had in Spain, where I lived, there was the Civil War, there was the dictatorship, there was the World Wars. And at this time, 5 guys went to the desert in America and they set up 5 studios, which is what Hollywood was built on. So we're basically, when we look to the United States of America, we're still following the narrative of 5 white men from very similar Jewish backgrounds. And we believe those stories and we buy into those stories. And, I was horrified this week when I watched News of the World, the Tom Hanks film that's out at the moment. And I was like, how can they still make Western films where everybody is an Anglo-Saxon in it? There were like a couple of featured extras. In the United States of America, 33% of cowboys were Black or Chinese. The Latin population in America was much higher. Women didn't just run brothels and wear petticoats. Women were working on as, stagecoach runners. They were running businesses. They were shooting. There were people, somebody like, Annie Oakley, who was in the Buffalo Circus, who married somebody from my family, so I'm very proud of that. But, she was an independent, strong woman who won a shooting competition age 15. But because the stories that we tell, and it's where, it's very important for any diverse group to remember that the lie becomes the truth. And a lot of the truths that we believe were lies. And they became lies, and they're stories, because everybody tells their own story. And it's the same way as I imagine that, the Latin community in Britain has a very different story to the one that's shown in the media. The Latin community in Spain has a very different story. People here, talk about Latinos in a way, but, all of my doctors come from Venezuela, because Venezuela has great doctors and they work in where I go to, I have private medical care in Spain, and where I go, they're all amazing, Venezuelan doctors, because of the Venezuelan medical system training is extremely good, and they speak Spanish. And it's the same with many things. So it's being very careful and being aware of this. One of the reasons I talk about this is I think that knowledge is power. And, it relates to the more you know about why the stories that are being told, a lot of people say, oh, why don't people write better scripts? people write amazing scripts. They're not getting financed. So the more, every time somebody says, oh, why doesn't somebody write a script about this person or that person? I'll be like, I think they have written a script about that person. It's just, it wasn't financed. And you guys have to be, you know, vocal about your community. You have to support your industry. You have to support the different Latin American films that are being made, because the more we support our own industry, the stronger it is. We can't go and see American films and then expect to work in European films or in British films if we're not watching them. You know, if you're supporting the other Latin theater, like when you go to the theater, are you going to see other projects with Latino actors in the United Kingdom? Make sure that you are. Reach out and, you know, and just get as much information about the industry as well. The other thing that I like to say before we go into the next part is that I think that the world has changed in the last year. And I think for you guys, for actors, it's very important that you recognize that it's been a very positive change for many of you. I think for the acting community in general, most of the actors that I know were devastated and very kind of rocked at the beginning of April, May 2020, because it felt like the world only wanted essential workers. And I think now, as we're coming up to a year anniversary, actors can see that they are essential workers. Storytelling is essential to the human being. In the same way, we've been telling stories to keep the dark away since the prehistoric times. We've always, it's part of the human condition. There's a slight tendency with the world in the last 10 years where there's been alienation of culture, particularly in, the problem with culture is that when the right wing, and I'm not very political, so I'm not going to get too into it, but when people who are not interested in having an educated electorate get into power, culture goes down. Culture is important because it's what educates us, but what most people don't really talk about is the fact that it educates our brain, but not to think, but to survive. That's why we have stories. It's one of the things, the mirror neurons that a realistic performance or a story creates in somebody gets your brain working. It makes you think, what would I do in that situation? How would I survive if I lose my mother, father? All the things that happen to us in our emotional journey in the life are things that we can learn how to deal with by having access to stories. That's why you tell stories to children, but we still tell stories as adults. And that's what exercises the neurons in our brain to work. That's what makes us resilient. And the world during the pandemic watched you guys. That's what we did. The stories, everybody stayed sane because they had access. If there hadn't been TV or film, we would have been reading stories. We need storytelling, and you guys are an essential part of storytelling. We don't make films or TV without actors, you know, except for animated, and then you can be voice actors, okay? So that you're still there. So it's very important to take that moment to recognize why you do what you do, but also how important it is what you do, because a lot of the times people don't understand why they're actors. They haven't asked themselves why they're an actor, but they also haven't asked what their role in society is. And it's a very important question to make to any actor, is like, I'm an actor because of, this is what moves me, what makes me an actor, but this is what my profession gives. And the more you realize that you have something to offer, the less you feel at the whim of, you know, a very unfair industry. And our industry is unfair, and it doesn't matter how many campaigns we do or how much we talk about it, it will remain unfair because it's not based on, you know, an equal division of wealth. It's not based on, it's based on winning. It's the, you know, it's like a high athlete sport. It's like the Olympics. The Olympics isn't fair either. The person who runs faster, is trained most, they win. And acting is like that as well. And our industry is like that. And there are things in our industry that are, it's very, very difficult because you're artists, but you've chosen a career which is in a business. You know, that's why it's called in America, in the United States, it's called the show business. It is not called, you know, the artistic cultural movement business. It's very expensive to make a film. It's even more expensive nowadays because of COVID. but you're artists. So it's very difficult to find that balance between being an artist working in a very hard-nosed, very expensive and very competitive business. Okay, that's that's a general introduction for actors. Now we can get into the more specifics of your acting community.
Yeah.
So
I think that covers a little bit about our first question, but maybe can you please give us an overview about how much presence do you think there is from Latin American talent in productions both in the UK and the rest of the European market? Being in Spain, you have I would say a wider knowledge about this, but maybe if you can compare both markets.
yeah, I mean, I don't know so much about the independent British market, but I do think that, you know, with things like there is going to be much bigger representation. People are looking for more diversity. The platforms that are shooting, like Netflix, Amazon, Stars, etc., Hula, they all want to reach as many markets as possible. And the Latin American market is important. So when they're shooting any of these modern contemporary series, they do want to have characters being played by people from the different areas of the world where they're marketing. So there's a huge globalization at the moment, which I think every country, every nation, and every nationality can take advantage of. Because if you could reach out, you know, series I've cast, like The Head, which is in recently, we cast all over the world because that's what they wanted. They want to have very big representation in it. So that's part of globalization, which you guys is a wave that you can use in your favor. In Spain, you know, in Spain it's interesting because in the Spanish productions, there's still not a huge representation of Latin actors in local Spanish because the stories are still slightly, you know, stereotypical, but there is. So it's making sure that if you're on the radar of who's casting here and that you're, you know, representing. And then in the Latin and the Spanish, no, sorry, in the American productions that are shot here, you're in a very, very good position because Americans think that Spanish people are Latinos and they're not, you know, so therefore, when we're looking for people here, quite often we're putting people forward and they're like, but they don't look like what we think a Spanish person looks like, you know, so that's where there's open. It's also true that in Spain there is a slight issue with people not speaking very good English, which is different from in Portugal. In Portugal, they speak extremely good English in general, and in Spain they speak extremely bad English in general. Generalization, okay, so it's not everybody, but that means that, you know, sometimes we will reach abroad. If I'm doing an American production, we'll quite often end up casting from Portugal or, you know, Latin-based actors who speak English that Americans can understand.
Okay, thank you. So the next question, we are often told to keep our accents and to embrace what makes us unique, which I agree to some extent. But how many opportunities are there for Latin American characters, or how do we fit in when the casting breakdowns is for any ethnicity? And if this includes accents as well, because maybe when they say any ethnicity, they refer to, you can look as you want, but does this refer to having a different accent? And sometimes, and many times when they refer to accents, they refer to other English speaking accents rather than national, international accents.
It's just, you have to
Sorry, someone is not muted. That's all right.
You have to be realistic about it. Your accent tells your backstory. You know, it's the same way that, you know, when you're working in Latin America, you have to be able to speak. If you're in Mexico, you have to have a Mexican accent, and a lot of people can't do that. In Portugal, Brazil, your accent tells too much about you. So if the story is written and it's somebody who grew up in Manchester, somebody who grew up in Manchester will not have a Peruvian accent. They'll have a Mancunian accent. So it just depends on the role. And in terms of quantifying things, it's a thing that actors always want to know. Like today, on the 22nd of February, I have no idea what the projects I'm going to be casting in the next month are, or what roles they're going to require. And nobody really does. You know, that's like, would be like knowing the lottery. I might get a project in tomorrow and it's something I have to cast 20 Latin American actors based in the UK, or I might never. There's actors who I know are amazing talents, who I would love to have on the actors that I've cast, and I've never been able to cast them. So I don't think you can quantify things like that. And then with accent, you just have to be totally realistic. The British accent is one of the most difficult in the world. When I'm saying British, I mean the accents in Britain are extremely difficult because it's very unique, the British accent. You've chosen a very difficult country to live because your accent in Britain defines not only your geographical location, but it defines your class and your education. And that makes it very, very difficult you can't be, even if you're a British actor who speaks with a, Mancunian accent, you will never be in a period drama unless you can do RP. So you have to learn RP. If you're born speaking with RP, but you get cast in something else, and accents are really hard work, So most people, who are born not speaking English as a first language and come to it as later on in life, find it absolutely impossible. There are very few people. It's a bit like learning Chinese. You need to work out, and it's not about your ear. It's about doing the physical work to do it. So it's possible, but it is extremely difficult, and it's extremely difficult for people who are native Spanish speakers, because in the same way it's very, very, very difficult for English people or English speakers to learn Spanish. They're not compatible languages. Whereas, for example, Catalan and Japanese are compatible, or Algerian and Polish are compatible. There are some languages that have got nothing to do with each other, but the sounds are, or Holland, Dutch people can speak English with no accent very quickly. Romanians can speak Spanish. And there are some languages that they have compatible rhythm and they have compatible sounds, so they can learn. But Spanish and English are not compatible. So it's extremely difficult. And it's just being aware that you have to be realistic about the fact that if you do not have 100% perfection in an accent, you will not be cast, because it is immediately noticeable, and it takes people out of the story.
Okay. You went through the database, through the Latinx Actors UK database, and thank you for that. Thank you for getting to know us a little bit. And what advice can you give us as a community to meet industry standards, this regarding to show reels, to headshots, to training, to just an overview?
I think that because everyone on the database is on Spotlight, you're all really meeting those. But what I would do is I would probably include your status to work in Europe when you have it, because I can see there's a question in the chat, but it's true. Like, I can't cast out of the UK at the moment. I have to cast out of, and it's the same as casting from America as casting from the UK. So anybody who wants to work in mainland Europe, and there's a lot of work, needs to be able to have their passport. So if people have Italian grandparents, or or have the opportunity, make sure that you get that sorted out so that it's an easy fix for you. At the moment, everything is difficult because of COVID, so it's even more difficult. But they haven't sorted out the the artistic visa yet either. So that's a very important thing to put on your on the thing. On the database, because at the moment it just says your status in the UK, and if you're trying to reach out, I would put your status in, or just have a very quick section on another status. I would also probably, because you're trying to reach out to Europe, I would have a small video presentation, which what I call an about me video, where you're speaking in your natural accent, so that people can hear you speaking in Spanish or Portuguese or English, if it's that, or just so that people can hear and see, because people don't really, actors, guys, everybody lies from you guys. And most people say they speak fluent English when they don't. Lots of people say they speak neutral Spanish when they don't. Lots of people say they speak Castilian Spanish when they don't. So we don't trust actors anymore until we hear them. And that's it. I mean, and we don't trust that when you say you can ride a horse either, because all actors say they can ride a horse, and then you put them on a horse, and then the horse is gone, and that's it. And you have shooting is delayed by 5 hours. You know, we're extremely mistrustful because somebody lied.
Yeah, definitely. Lucy, another question is, how could we approach the European market or other markets as the US, if you know of some information, but being based in the UK? Because anyone that's registered in the database, basically they're based in the UK. So how can we approach these other markets? Should we try and have an agent for those markets? Some agents, they want exclusivity from like even being here, but they're not going to try for you in other countries.
I think one of the things that I would say to actors is, remember, there's not so many general answers. You know, I know everybody wants there to be a magic formula. If there was a magic formula, you'd all be doing it. It really depends on your situation. Like when you have good credits, when you're already slightly known in your own country, then you use that as a platform. Like you have to use where you are as your base and build from that. I don't think at the moment, it's what I said just before, it's very difficult at the moment unless you're legal to work in Europe, and that has to be resolved. You know, and the same in the States. There is absolutely no point being in the United States unless you're legal. But if you have just done a film that's won a BAFTA, or you've won an award in anywhere in the world, then you use that as a platform, and then people will be more likely to cast you. I would always keep reaching out to people, like, but it's being aware. A lot of the times actors want to know the secret to reaching out to people before they've worked on their craft. You know, there's no point reaching out to somebody in another country who's going to have to pay to travel you unless you're bringing something more with your service, which is what I was talking about earlier, that is going to make them believe that you're the right person for the role. So, you know, there's a great demand for great, good actors. There's also, you know, and it's not about being famous, guys, and it's not about having thousands or billions of Instagram followers. It's about having done the work, you know. So if you haven't done, and it's very frustrating because I know everybody wants to work, but a lot of the time, actors, when you're not working, what you're trying to do is get access to people who will see you in castings instead of trying to actually work on your craft and do your work. And I know that that's frustrating and it's very difficult, but things like, you know, theatre is great. Maybe you've done a great theatre show and it's had really good reviews. That's the time to approach people. But it's not, it's very cruel and it's very difficult. But, you know, if you can't get a job in your own area, then why would you get a job in another area? But when you're working, then you reach out, you go to festivals. If your projects are in festivals, either online, which is where everything is now, you make as many contacts as possible. And this is, I've talked a lot about this, like with Victor, you know, remember that networking is not job seeking, it's community building. So you should be building your community all the time. And that will, you know, so if you want to work in the Spanish market and you're legal to work in the Spanish market, you should be watching Spanish films. You should be going to the Q&As with Spanish directors. You should be going to the festivals in Spain. You should be contacting or following or being on people's radar in Spain. And then it becomes much more organic, you know, and it's about, you can't just, it's not about just sending a mail. You know, it's about kind of being involved so that when you know, like the people I know who work a lot, you know, in different areas, they go to the theatre a lot. You know, I know lots of foreign actors who work here and live here, but they turn up here and they don't go, oh, I don't speak Catalan, I'm not going to the theatre. They go to the theatre in Catalan, even if they come from another place. They go out, you know, they meet other actors, they go and watch the short films, they get involved. And that's how you build a career. Because, you know, this is a very long-term career. It's not a quick fix. But I suppose the career of an actor is a bit like snakes and ladders. You know, you go up a ladder and then suddenly an unpleasant snake comes, you go down that, then you go along, then there's another ladder. It's not very linear. It's not, you can't build, you know, in the same way as building a house. It can be a bit, it's more like a Gaudi style of architecture, I guess. You know, all sort of different flourishes. Okay. Does that answer what you wanted to
Yeah,
ask?
definitely yes. Definitely yes. So to take this a little bit back to the previous question, regarding show reels and scenes, like, because I mean, yeah, we need to be in the theater, but people doesn't want to see show reels with theater material in them. So maybe you have 5 shows, you have done 5 shows where people has been able to go and watch. But do you recommend us to invest in getting show reels? I mean, if you don't have the media material to put on a show reel, like there is like professional credits.
I find this really complicated thing to answer because I think it's really unfair to ask people to pay to have show reels. And I get really angry with agents who won't take people unless they get show reels. I think you should just make an about me video, which is what I said before, where you just speak, tell about, you can talk about your theater, you can talk about your love of acting, and then you send that to people. I think it's really unfair. A show reel is meant to be an edition of work, professional work that you've done. But the reason I find it difficult, because obviously you're running your own business. So if you have money and you want to invest in a scene for a show reel and it's going to look really good, and you've decided to do that, that's fine as well. So I'm a casting director. I don't care how I know you. I don't care whether I've met you because you've done a show reel, I've seen you in the theater, I've seen you in a film, I've seen you in a short film, I've met you on, you know, on the bus stop, I've met you in a festival. I don't care how I've met you, but if you're right for a role, then I will call you and I will get you to come into my studio for casting, or I will get you to do a self-tape. And that's it. And I find I think that's how I work. I think in the UK it is slightly different because they're much more focused on people being with agents.
Mm-hmm.
So that if you're not with an agent, it's very difficult to access stuff. But on the other hand, you know, our jobs and the reason that we're seen as being good in our jobs, you know, casting directors, are because we have the ability to find the right person for the role. And I don't, you know, and that doesn't, it's not a tick list. It's like, I'm not going to say Victor's right or Alvaro is right. Oh, but they don't have a good photo. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
I'm not going to say, you know, that's not how it works. I just have to get it. Anyway, I think I'm not wrong.
Yeah.
So what other questions do you have?
So another question that we have prepared is, how often are roles filled by non-ethnic specific talent, and how do you feel about the chance of having talent having the cultural, ethnic, and experience for the role? So basically, true representation. What do you think about it? And if I can add to the question, does people know within the markets in the UK and Europe that Latin Americans, they don't look the same? Because that's another thing. I look very Italian and I'm white. So when you think about Latin Americans, it's not precisely this.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the problem. It's like, you know, some people think, you know, that all Latin Americans look one way. Some people think that Spanish people look like Latin Americans. I don't think people are particularly aware. And it depends on the project and depends what they're working on.
How often would you say then that these characters are not filled by another groups but the true representation, like the specific people for like a Latin American people representing Latin American characters?
Carlo, I think you're still making that great mistake of asking for numbers and percentages and things like that. It doesn't matter. You just don't know. It depends. There are some places that it's cast. I can't think of, I mean, I can think of times where, you know, people cast people because of their essence and because of what they look like, you know, and what they sound like. So, you know, the roles that are played by, you know, Narcos, there were Spanish people playing it, Mexican people playing it, American people who look Spanish. That's what happens. People choose. And I think, you know, and I can see there's another question. It's like, it's not fair. These are projects that are run by, you know, either private enterprises. They're the people who are financing it. They choose. You know, the industry is very much an industry where the people who are paying, you know, he who pays the piper calls the tune. And the only way that we can influence that is by making sure that we're watching films and making sure that we're not about complaining about the films that have already been made, but trying to be active members of the industry so that people are more interested and realize that people want to see the films.
Mhm.
They want to see films with true representation. I don't think, I think it's very important that the stories are diverse. Then I think it's very important that the actors who play them are diverse. They're in contemporary, dramas. It's very important for me that they reflect society as it is. In historical dramas, I think they're always wrong because they're always telling the story in a very different, I mean, they're quite often whitewashing the past and then saying that they're doing it because it's historically accurate. And I think there's a lot of misconceptions about how much people moved around in the world. I think that now people are trying to find things that are more interesting. I think people are trying to have better representation. I believe that representation matters a lot more. I believe that representation matters for many, many reasons, but but for me, representation doesn't mean having more Arab actors playing terrorists. Representation for me means having more scripts where Arabs are not written as terrorists. Representation for me means that not all the roles where there's a Mexican, that they're a drug dealer. That's for me is representation. But it's very difficult for me when actors talk about representation, when I believe it begins with the script. And it's the writers who write, but it's the people who are financing the projects that they need. There are thousands of wonderful stories about, Native Americans, Latin Americans. There's the stories of very many stories of very strong women that have been written. They just haven't been made, and that's the problem because, of all there's, when they, something, when the Guardian moved office is, about, I think it was 15 years ago, there was some reason it got evacuated and they was like, every single journalist had a script in their computer that they were working on. There's people write scripts, they write interesting stories, but if the financiers aren't financing them, casting directors, we don't cast, we don't put the people into films. We suggest the people who are in the stories of the films that have been financed. And, I've refused to cast some things because of the representation in them, but that's because I was against the story that they were going to tell. And I don't do it very often because I'm not that rich, but, and I do, and I will say, if somebody gives me a role of a doctor, in Spain, there's a doctor, I'm always like, you know what? I don't think he would be, necessarily white and a male and a man, because when I go to the doctor, that's not the truth. And then, but it's a conversation I have to have, and I have to make the director or the producer or the showrunner think it was their idea.
Yeah, definitely.
And you can look, anybody can look at the films that I've cast and you can see where there are people playing non-traditional or Latino people playing, or Afro-descendant people playing roles in the films that I've cast, in smaller characters sometimes, or in major characters. But you'll never see that I was, credited for doing that. And I'm proud of that. But that's something I've always cared about. But that comes from, my life, my family, my childhood, my vision of the world. And then when I talk to other casting directors, we're in the same vision. We like to be able to work with the most diverse field of talent possible. But we like working with amazing actors. And I think the thing that it's very important for actors to remember is that talent trumps everything.
Yeah.
You can be from wherever in the world, you can be with whatever ethnicity, background, whatever. But if you have that talent that lights up the screen, you can be Danny Trevello, and if he was here, you think, oh, what, he looks like a gangster, he's never going to work, and he's working, and great to work with. Or you can be, one of my favorite actors, what I'm trying to say is that I think one of the problems is that acting is like a game of poker, and I say this quite a lot, and that there are some cards that trump everything, and one of them is talent. And you're born with that, and then you can foster it, you can lose your talent, You can make your talent grow. Your talent will grow with your self-confidence, but it is talent that trumps it. And that's what we're looking for in the industry is people, and it doesn't matter where you're from. And you've seen things, you know, and that's going to happen more. And then there can be people who can try and stop that happening for, you know, variety of interests. Okay.
So yeah, I think that if I can link this before we go to the questions, so maybe guys, you can start popping up questions if you have some. I think that if I can link this to us consuming our productions I'm talking about us from our countries, maybe we can still hear and still get the financiers to be interested, because in the end, that's why they do it. And I'm sure there are some that are after creativity or they are creatives and stuff, but many is just about money. So yeah. Thank you.
But also, I think no, and it's also important to know that what you guys are doing is really good, and it's bringing so that people can find you, because we have to be able to find talent, you know. And for me, you know, in the last year, I've realized how many more, you know, Latin American actors are living in Britain than I thought. And that's because I've been doing online workshops. I've been doing a lot of things, and people have been showing up. And I've been like, wow, I didn't realize that there were so many Latin American actors in the UK. And that's great. And I keep saying it to, you know, my associate, oh, put him on file. Oh, I didn't realize. Oh, that's great. That's good, because they speak English, which is, you know, my market. So the idea that you do this and you promote the culture and you go out to everybody so that all casting directors in Europe know that if they're looking for a Latin American actor, they don't have to fly them from Latin America, and that you speak English and that you're ready and that you're working on your craft, you know, that is something that is really amazing. And it's a really, really good thing to do. It doesn't mean that you will all work, because it's not an employment agency, but it does mean that when, the way I say it is, when I was talking about the casting, you have to be in the correct pond, so that when somebody's casting, they throw the hook into that pond. And you guys are creating a pond where people will know about you. And a lot of people, the Russians, the casting bridge guys from Russia are doing the same. And I think that with obviously Russian actors. And I think that's just great. And the more that you elevate each other, the better. And that will be your way working forward. And it will be, and it's just a very good thing. That's, I mean, I would say.
Thank you. That's a huge pat in the back. So thank you for that. So guys, if you have any questions, please feel free to ask them on the group chat. And Sammy, if we have any questions right now, or Alvaro. Or...
Yeah, Luci, can you talk a little bit about your experience right now with the, if such a market exists with Iberoamerica, now that Netflix is kind of bringing closer together Spain with Latin America, and same as Portugal, Brazil. Yeah, could you talk a little bit about what you see from where you are?
Yeah, I mean, I just think that it's, I mean, I already said that. I think it's a moment to take advantage to work out who's casting those shows and be in touch with them, because at the moment I'm working on a project that's been shot in Uruguay, and they're flying people. So I'm working with casting directors from Brazil, Argentina, and Uruguay, and me, because I'm Europe. And it's really exciting. So they're flying people over, but not Latin America. I mean, they're not going to fly Latin American actors from Europe to Latin America. So I'm doing the European casting. But, you know, it's very exciting to see, you know, how Brazil is developing, how many people are working in Brazil, the casting. I'm working for Amazon Brazil at the moment, who is the financiers of it, but with government. And then seeing how many actors can travel around Latin America, because they're looking for people who speak Brazilian in Uruguay, they're casting in Argentina, they're casting in Brazil. And because people can travel, I mean, people have to then go into quarantine for 2 weeks when they get to Uruguay. But there's a lot going on. And I'm also working on another project that I've worked on Luis Miguel for all 4 seasons. And it's the same, I do the European casting, but it's a very easy conversation. Like, I have to talk to Luis Rosales tonight, you know, so that because of the way the world works at the moment, it's a much smaller place. So it's about being available and being in touch with people, but knowing the industry as well. You know,
Yeah.
so
And
it's
as
that knowing who is casting what of the projects that you would like to work on. So who are the casting directors? How can you be on their radar? What do they do? So that's, and there's always collaboration, hopefully.
And as a casting director who's in a collaboration with in a in a collaboration with another part of the world, if you're in Brazil, if the project takes place in Brazil, for example, do you have a say in saying, well, I've got a few Brazilian actors here in Spain. Here's a suggestion, or you just stay exclusively with the brief that you're given?
They don't
And
travel people from Latin, you know, they won't be traveling Latin American actors from Europe to there, but you would get onto their radar. You know, it's the same way as that all of you should be, you know, building as many bridges in as many places as possible so that when the role is right for you, it knows where to find you. Because it doesn't mean, you know, flights. I mean, it's very complicated at the moment because of COVID. But, you know, say, for example, on the show that I'm doing, shooting in Uruguay, there were some of the actors who were based in Portugal, and they're being taken over there. The Brazilian actors are in Portugal, so that does happen. And then another of the Brazilian actors is another, you know, Latin American British actor who is very well known, and he may go as well. But you know, he's an extremely well known actor.
yeah.
So it just depends on what level you're at and where you're on, but it's about building this community and building your body of work.
Any other question, Alvaro? No? All right. So we have in the chat a question from Constanza. She says, apologies in advance to bringing the devil into the room. Luci, have you seen any difference in casting projects related to the UK now that we are not part of the UK? So changes.
Yes.
Sorry.
But I haven't been able to cast people from the UK for a very long time now because, and that when Brexit started happening, the Spanish Film Academy or the Spanish Film Financiers said that British actors no longer count towards the, you know, grant, the government grant, the IC, the Spanish film. So you have to just be aware that it is going to be really difficult. I mean, Brexit is a nightmare for the things that we, and probably most of the people, or I would say everybody in this group believes in it, which is not borders, not visas, not immigration issues. And that is what Brexit has brought in. And it is, you know, it's a real pain. I mean, there's a lot of campaigning to do, but, you know, I was on a project that was going to shoot the Canary Islands, and 35 people were stopped at the airport and they couldn't fly to the Canary Islands. So that project has fallen apart. And that was a big budget BBC project. And that was last week. And they were convinced that they were going to be able to get through. And it's a combination, obviously, of COVID and Brexit. But there was no way, they couldn't get their film crew and their cast from Britain into the Canary Islands. So that project has gone away. But in Spain, they're going to work it out, but it's just at the moment, it's very difficult. But at the moment, yes, who asked that, Constanza, it is extremely difficult to cast from the UK for European productions. But it will happen because we need the actors from the UK. So
does it change if you have an European passport, I guess?
Yes, that was the first thing I said.
Exactly.
Of course it changes if you have a European passport. Like, the more of you that can have and get European passports, the better. Like.
So another question is from Fernanda Spindola. She says, when the character is not originally specified as Latinx, how open is the UK or European market to having a Latinx actors fill that role?
It's the same thing, guys. You keep asking questions like we should generalize. It depends. In some projects, totally, like projects like Warrior Nun, which I did, they were open to people being any ethnicity. Some of the projects I've done have, and some of them are not. It just depends on the role, and it depends on the project, and it depends on the producer, and it depends on the director. Like, it's just one of those things that it depends on what story they're trying to tell. And you just have to be aware that, you know, some people are extremely open. No, some people actively are wanting that because that's the story they want to tell. You know, so if you think about something like Bridgerton, You know, they actively wanted to tell that story, so it was very open to a range of diversity. Then you have people, you know, doing, you know, public television like EastEnders or whatever, and they're actively into promoting diversity, but within being very correct in who plays what, because they're trying to be authentic and representative, you know, have representation. And then you have directors who are open to, you know, seeing what happens and just having interesting characters.
And actually, in those productions, there are these actually two examples of Venezuelan characters. I'm from Venezuela. Two Venezuelan characters in these productions that are nationwide. So, well, I guess it's about the writers and the financiers, yes. So Alejandra Costa asks if, so she says, hi Lucy, hi everyone. I'd like to know your thoughts on self-tapes. When I tape for the UK, I tend to go for something a bit stiller, but my agent in Spain always asks me to be a bit more dynamic. Would you be happy to see two different takes for each role or for?
Yeah, I personally am totally happy to see two different takes. But that's because of the way I run my office. I have a very big office and I have somebody who does the technical side. So it's just checking. Remember, when I'm answering, I'm not answering for all casting directors. I'm answering for a very specific me, which is how I run my office, that I live in Spain, and that kind of projects I work in. But it's also because it just depends on the projects. You know, if you're doing something for a gritty British drama, they need it to be very internal. If you're doing something for an American show, they want it to be a little bit more what I call heightened reality. If you're doing something for Spanish TV, it's about watching the films and TV shows of what you're self-taping for. You know, so if you're doing something for Netflix, comedy, American, it's the same as if you're taping for a Mexican telenovela, you're not going to be doing the same as if you're taping for Ken Loach.
Definitely.
Adjust to the genre when you know, and I know it's difficult. And I would totally, me personally, I'd be totally happy to have two takes. And if I didn't like it, but I liked what you were doing, I'd ask you to do another one.
Okay, so hi Lucy. So based on the stories and how complicated it is to get cast as Latin Americans, would you encourage us to perfect as many languages and accents from Europe as possible, or will native speakers always be prioritized?
I've answered this already. You're not going to sound native. Like if you sound native, then you are native. And if you're trying to sound it, of course they're going to prioritize native speakers because they are telling the story that they want. It's like, you know, I will never be, I'm not an actor and I really respect the acting process, but, you know, I don't look Spanish. I've been living in Spain for 30 years. I still have an accent. Nobody would ever believe me if I said I was from Toledo. And if they were writing a film about a woman from Toledo, they would never cast somebody who looked like me and sounded like me because immediately the audience would say, oh, she's not from Toledo. And it's just that thing. You have to know what you give, what you are. And of course, you know, say, for example, in Giancarlo, he sounds Italian, his name, he could look Italian. So if he speaks Italian because he learned it from his family and his Italian is perfect, then of course he can play Italian because he is Italian. But if he doesn't, because he didn't learn Italian from his grandparents and he doesn't have an Italian accent, then he can't play Italian.
Can we ask a last question, Lucy?
You can ask as many questions as you want.
All right, if you have more questions, guys, you feel free to send them. So John Gutierrez, he asked, hey Lucy, what has been some memorable casting experiences for you?
I can remember lots of casting experiences. I mean, that's my life. I can remember Alvaro having to dance salsa a lot when he was very young, when he was still at drama school. So I can remember that. And I can remember then he had to come to Spain for the callback, because in those days we didn't do self-tapes. So he had to come and dance salsa, even though he was, you know, obviously Mexican and it wasn't actually his, but he was very good. I can remember, there are lots and lots of casting experiences that are memorable to me. I'm very much in the moment, so they don't, you know, I'm trying to think of a very memorable casting. I can remember my worst casting experience was when I was casting a horror film in the Canary Islands. And I was casting for zombies, and one guy took it way too thin and he had me pinned against the wall, and I thought I was being strangled. And the camera guy had to intervene because he'd got too method in his zombiness. So after that, I was, you know, that put me, he didn't get the role. It was extremely memorable because he was meant to be, you know, a zombie frothing at the mouth, murdering people, but I didn't think he needed to murder me.
How scary that is, huh? Hey, Lucy and everyone, this is from Flaviana Cruz. What are your big no-nos, pet peeves when it comes to additional self-tapes?
I'm thinking about that. I suppose with self-tapes, not really. I mean, you know, self-tapes is about the performance. And I'm asking people for self-tapes. So I generally like the performances that they're doing. And it's just seeing who's got it or not. Of course, a pet peeve would be if you can't see or hear the person. But I think most people now in 2021 know how to self-tape. You know, it's something that people didn't know before. And in auditions, my pet peeve is when people don't know the lines. You know, and they come in and then they say, oh, some casting director told me that I should be, you know, cold read. And I'm like, I didn't. You know, I think you should be able to act and learn the lines and act and show. And the other thing that is particularly my biggest pet peeve is when people come in and they say, I haven't had time to learn the script. And I'm like, but I sent it to you a week ago. And I haven't had time. And I'm like, you know what? It's a pet peeve for me because I work really hard, you know, and I'm casting in Madrid and Barcelona, and I get up at 5 o'clock in the morning and I get on the train. I go on the first Abbey to Madrid. I get there, I'm there at 10 o'clock. I show up, I've read the scripts, I've selected the actors, and somebody comes in, and it's a big opportunity for them usually, and they don't know the lines, and they're saying they didn't have time, and they're, you know, moaning. And I'm like, well, I sent them to you, you know, get up earlier, make time. I know that you have to work. I know life is complicated, but, you know, life's, you know, change your gear. You know, nobody's going to give you anything. No, there's no such thing, you know, as a free lunch in this. There's no such thing as a free pass. And of course, there are people, which are the exceptions to the rule, because they can do everything wrong and they can still get cast. And that is just it. They can not know their lines, but they can either, they look so perfect for the role, or they've walked into the casting and they've owned the part in some way, even when they've done everything wrong, and they will get the part. So there is always the exception that proves the rule, but you have to be really good for that. And then my other, you know, that's about it really. And the other one is that I try really hard to give you the information, you know. So I cast for, sometimes in Spain, I'm casting for second seasons for things like Hannah and stuff like that. And I send it out, or I've sent out, like I've just cast something recently and I was sending out, you know, try and watch the director's film, blah, blah, blah. And then people were coming to the casting with the director and he'd say, so have you seen my film? And they go like, no, I haven't had time. I'd be like, do your work.
Exactly.
You know?
Yeah. So Santiago Godoy asks, hello, Lucy, or hello, Lucy. What other ways have you met or discovered talent other than the usual platforms? Latinx Actors UK, the new one?
I have met actors in every single possible way that you could imagine. Probably. I've met actors because a friend has introduced them to me. I've met actors because they've written to me. I've met actors because they've been in a networking event that I've been at. I've met actors at festivals. I've met actors who've done courses with me, which is not the usual way I do courses. I'm always very clear when people do courses with me that it's not a way for me to cast you. I like teaching, and I only do those kind of courses. I don't do them to meet actors, but I have met actors like that. I have met actors because they have married, you know, my best friends. I have met actors. How else have I met actors? I've met actors when I went on a yoga retreat. There was somebody there. I haven't. My best story, which is true, but it wasn't related to me, is, you know, it's very, your actors and the way you meet them, it doesn't matter. But I know somebody whose big opportunity came to them because they went to LA and then they got arrested for drunk driving. And they were put in a cell with a producer for that night where you have to sober up, and they became friends and the producer cast them something. So you can meet actors even when you've committed, I mean, you can, you know, meet a director or somebody who will change your career when you've committed a crime. You know, I don't recommend moving to LA and being arrested for drunk driving.
I was about to say that. We're not recommending everyone to go out and get drunk.
To meet your chances.
Same way that there's a lot of people in LA who go to, you know, AA because there's a lot of very famous people. So you try to get into the cool AA. So that's another way that people make their careers in LA. And I do know people who've done that too. Had to pretend. I mean, I think they are alcoholics. I'm not sure. But, you know, it's like I meet actors. I think the thing about it is that the biggest misconception is that we are not, I've never found a role for an actor. You know, I've never, and I've been, you know, so one of my best friends is an actress and she's extremely well known, but I've actually never cast her because I put her forward for stuff, but I don't put her forward for stuff that she's not right for. And, you know, and I would be privileged if I cast her. I have, you know, I have lived with actors, you know, my ex is an actor. I never cast him and he was extremely, you know, well known, but it wasn't, I could never have found a role for him. We don't look for roles for actors. That's, your agent looks for opportunities for you. That's an important thing to do because they look for opportunities. They look for doors to open for you. But I look for actors for roles. I don't look for roles for actors. So every project I get, I have no idea who the actors are going to be in it because I don't know what, I have to investigate the universe of the director. I have to see who they like, who they think is right. I have to investigate the budget. How much money are they prepared to pay? If it's big budget, they need to have people that their investors know who they are. And that's part of it in the main roles. Or they need to know that they can sell the picture and get the money back. But I have never, ever, and I have a lot of friends who are actors and I like actors and I have people. I've also met actors because my family always think that I'll be able to get them roles. So my family always say, I met an actor at the supermarket and I've sent you them, so can you get them a job? Or, you know, my friend's son, mother, brother, whatever it is. I meet a lot of actors like that. But mainly I'm known, and it's really important that you do the maths as well, in the same way as about, you know, if you look at my career, I work a lot. I'm extremely well known in Spain. But the roles, the films that I'm best known for are things like Victoria. I cast one person in that film. Vicky Cristina Barcelona, Woody Allen film. I cast 5 people in that film. You know, I didn't cast, Woody Allen doesn't have big casts and he comes with the leads already attached. And then I cast everybody else. I've cast, you know, films, probably, you know, films that I've cast like, you know, Baby, which is out at the moment, Juanma Bajo Loa's film. That is, you know, winning on awards. There are 3 people in that film. You know, there's not, you know, there are 50 people in this group. I haven't cast 50 people in major roles this year. I've cast, in commercials, it's different because I run a commercial department as well, which is great. But, you know, this year I'm casting an American film. I'm casting the thing that's being shot in Uruguay. I'm casting something that's being shot in Mexico. I'm casting the British BBC thing that has just stopped not shooting. So I cast it, but it's not being shot. And if I add up all of those people, I've cast in 2021, 30 people. No. Under 20 people in.
Quiet times.
What?
Quiet times.
No, that's busy times.
All right. All right.
But that's not quiet times. I'm working in 2 continents. I'm working on one of Mexico's top shows. I'm working on one of Brazil's top shows. I'm working on one of the major productions that was going to be shot in Russia, in the Canary Islands. I'm working on another film. That is a lot of people. That's a lot of projects. But what I'm trying to get you guys to understand is that casting directors, we don't cast thousands of actors. You know, for me, I'm at one of the busiest times of my life, but I cast maybe a lead, Juan Mabajolo's film that has 3 leads in it, 3 people. And that was a major, and it's a major film that I'm extremely proud of, but it has 3 people in it. So it's not that we don't deal in quantity. We deal in very small, and an exercise that I would ask you all to do is think of your favorite director. Who is your favorite director? Then think about how many films that director has made in their lifetime so far. So think, and then go to IMDb and count how many actors have been in those films and do the maths. It's not such a huge amount. Somebody like, I don't know, even Almodovar, his casts are averaging around 10 or 15 people in the cast, including, the supporting actors. And he's made, in the last 10 years, he's made 5 films. So that means every Spanish actor I know and Latin American actor wants to be in Almodovar's film. He has cast less people than are in this meeting.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
And I think people, that's what I'm talking about, the power. That's why you guys don't, like, actors need to have the information. So you need to be on lots and lots of people's radars so that when the role is for you, you're being looked for. Okay.
Okay. Alvaro, would you like to ask your question?
Yeah. When a casting director gets attached on IMDb Pro, because as an actor, you're trying to find as many platforms as possible to get all the information. By the time a casting director gets attached to it, is that too late to try to get in touch with the casting team?
It's another question. It depends. Usually, yes.
Okay.
Usually, yes.
Yeah.
But it's another question. Maybe not. But it's not. But it is the time to take note of who the casting director who's casting the kind of projects that you would like to be in.
Yeah.
But it's not. We don't do generally open calls. So if somebody's attached, you don't need to write to them saying, I want to be in this project, but you could make sure that you're on their radar. And you have to just be, work out the intelligent way to be on their radar. So for example, if it's me, it's pretty easy because I'm very active on social media. So you would follow, and I'm very active and I'm very vocal on social media, but there's somebody, like other people are or not. Other people have offices, but you do a little bit of investigation and think, okay, these are the casting directors I would like to be on their radar. Because by putting ourselves out as casting director of project, we're not saying that we are running an employment agency. It's the same thing, but we all want, if you are a brilliant, amazing actor, Alvaro, we want to know about you. So you have to make sure that your material and your stuff represents the actor that you really are, and that gets onto people's radar. And to treat it as a way of like, here's my service. If you are ever looking for me,
Here I am.
Yeah.
Here
I love that change of mindset that you're talking about.
Yeah. And I really, really believe that it works. And it also works because I really think that one of the most important things that you guys have to do is to build your validation from inside. Because this industry is based on trust. I feel difficult saying this because I know I've already said this to Victor. I'm repeating myself, Victor, I'm sorry. This industry is based on trust. So when a director or a producer or a showrunner gets in touch with me, they trust me with their project. Whenever I'm saying thank you and gratitude, like in my show or whatever, I say to people, thank you for trusting me with your project. Because they trust me to find them the right cast, to put the people forward. And when I call an actor to a casting, I am not calling an actor to test them, to see if they're a good actor. I'm calling the actor because I really trust that they will do a good job and that I will look good if that actor is chosen to go on set. So I'm trusting that they will do a good job. And when a director chooses you to be in their project, they're trusting you because the one person who can't be sacked is an actor after they've filmed. Everybody else you can get rid of. You can get rid of the casting director very easily. You can get rid of the director. I've been on projects where the director has been sacked. I've been on 2 projects where they've sacked the director. I've never been on a project where they've sacked the actor. They've had to reshoot on one thing, but I, thank God, didn't cast it because he was so bad. But it was a TV show. I mean, it was like the equivalent of EastEnders. And he did such a bad job that I wasn't the casting director. But In general, they have to make it work once they've trusted you with the role, because it's too expensive to reshoot. So it's a disposition of trust. Who knows you better than anybody else on this planet? You. So if you don't trust yourself, how can you expect the industry to trust you? Or if you're showing us that you don't trust yourself because you're nervous, and it's okay to be nervous when it's enthusiasm, but if you're looking like you don't learn the lines, you can't get up on time, you can't be punctual, you can't do this, you look like you don't believe in yourself. So if you don't believe in yourself, how can you expect the industry to believe in you? So that's what I think that actors have to work on a lot, is their confidence and to be able to feel safe from the inside. Because when you feel like that, then you exude self-confidence. And it's very different, obviously, in Latin America and in America and in Britain. Like in Britain, you have to feel it inside and just not show it too much. Otherwise, they don't like you. And if you're in America, you have to show it because they believe in that. That's their outward. And it will get you a very long way in America being a lot more like this. And then I think it's different in, it's very different in Mexico to Argentina to Uruguay to Venezuela, but it's being culturally sensitive.
All right, Luci, if you can have one last question.
Sure.
Gael Lecornec, she says, hi, Luci, would you recommend having different show reels like language show reels with scenes in different languages and theater show reel for stage? I speak French to a native standard. Mom is Brazilian and dad is French, but I rarely get scene for French, always Latin American. Thanks.
I reckon, and this is a personal opinion and it's from where I'm based, so you should ask other UK casting directors what they think. I think you should just have your very, very best work on your show reel and have it subtitled. But I also believe that you should have a, about me video so that people can hear you speaking French. And then, French is, pretty multicultural and there's a lot of work. And it depends, Gail, if you're legal to work in France or not. And if you're legal to work in France, then you should be approaching a French industry with your very, very best work, but also showing that you speak French with the accent that they believe is French. Okay.
All right. Should I make a last question? Very last.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very last.
Maria Leon says, hi, Luci. In musical theater here, most casting directors have a few go-to agencies. When you cast from a spotlight, do you start with specific agencies or do you refine your search based on credits or skills?
Depends on the project.
Yeah.
It just depends on the project because sometimes, like, for example, where I found Alvaro 20 years ago, or whatever, it wasn't that long ago, but was on Spotlight because I needed somebody who could dance salsa and look like this and do that. And that was where, and he was a drama student at the time, so he came up in that section. Where I've just cast something in December where I needed people who spoke Pashtun. So I would look, Pashtun, does everybody know what Pashtun is? No, you see, I didn't either. It's a language that they speak in Afghanistan. And there are not that many Pashtun speaking actors in the world. So I went on Spotlight and I found a few because it's very similar then to Farsi, which is what they speak in Iran. So I found, and I cast it in the end. So, but then I don't send it out to all the agencies. I send it out to the 5 actors who spoke Pashtun that were on Spotlight. Whereas if I'm going out for a role that is, it depends on the requirements, so sometimes I go send to all, and, if it's something that's kind of generic, but then the problem is that, everybody submits everything. So I have thousands of applications. And I think that UK casting directors are probably a lot more selective with the agencies than I am because they know people and they have different relationships. I kind of quite often send out to all, but then my assistant spends a long time reading through it. If I can guarantee I could put a Spotlight breakdown out now and I could ask for a Latin American actor and they would be sending me people, who had never even been to, outside of Because some agencies and the less reputable agencies submit their clients for everything. And it doesn't help. It doesn't make it any, it won't get you the job, and it doesn't get you any kind of, get you seen in any different way.
All right, Lucy, we're very thankful for this meeting, for all the advice and everything you have done for us today. Can you talk about, can you talk to us about the business blueprint online? And there is a gift for our audience.
Oh, no. Okay, first of all, thank you very much for having me here. Enjoy your acting journey, everybody, because it is a journey that you don't know whether it has a beginning or an end. I run a course on, I hate talking about my courses. I run a course which is online, that we've got maybe one place left this week. We start on Tuesdays and Thursdays for 4 weeks. And then we'll be starting again in 5 or 6 weeks' time. But if you follow me on Instagram, you can see the information. And if anybody wants to know more about the course, they can ask Victor, because he knows about it, because he's done it. But I wrote it during lockdown because I like teaching, and it's about having a plan. And I really believe that actors should have a plan. And I believe also that it's very difficult for actors to have a plan. But just because it's difficult doesn't mean that you shouldn't do it. And most actors I know make plans when they're unemployed. And I think you should be making a plan when you're working. You know, you're networking. You shouldn't do networking when you're feeling vulnerable. It's the worst time. You know, when you're sending out, like when you're feeling bad about your career as an actor and you start sending out unsolicited mails to casting directors and they don't answer you, or producers don't answer you, it makes you feel worse about yourself as an actor. I think that I think that if you have a plan, then you know when you're approaching casting directors or producers, because it's part of your plan, and you're not doing it at Saturday night. You know, I get mails sometimes from actors at 4 o'clock in the morning on a Saturday night, and I know that they're sitting there because they've got home and, you know, haven't, you know, well, at the moment because of lockdown, everybody's got weird habits, but that they're feeling miserable. But I mean, I really, you know, and I think you have to remember that a lot of people, we have the problem that, you know, my work mail comes in on my phone. So I could be, you know, having the time of my life, you know, somewhere. And my phone suddenly goes, and I look, and I'm like,
and
oh.
Lucy has given us a 15% discount if you sign up to her.
Yeah. So, oh, you can have 15%. And you can follow me on Instagram, and that's it. And you're very welcome. And anybody has questions, and just enjoy it, and remember that you are important. And if you need to help with making a plan, you can come and do the course with me, or, you know, and it's just about giving you more information, kind of like today, but more personalized, and working with you to help you get plans, and working on self-tape technique and online audition technique.
Your Instagram account is at Luci_Lenox, is it?
Exactly.
All right. And then, guys, this is going to be uploaded, so you can refer to it in future, for future references. It's going to be on the Latinx Creative Community section on our website. If you want to sign up, if you want to register in our database, if you're of a Latin American background and are based in the UK, or if you have friends that could fit those that criteria, please do spread the voice and share it with them. Thank you so much, Lucy. It's been a huge pleasure to have you today.
And just remember, guys, you need to be treated as individuals, so treat the industry, each person in it as an individual, and then it makes it much more likely that you'll be treated as individuals, as well as being collectives. And thank you very much, and good luck, and I'm sure we'll be in touch.
Thank you so much.
Can I add one more thing? Guys, if you did enjoy the Q&A today, we are looking to organize more. If you could spread the word via social media, if you did enjoy it, tag us, tag Lucy, and yeah, let's create a community.
Hey, and we have two new news that we cannot talk about yet, but they're coming up.
News we can't talk about. Thank you very much, everyone, for attending.
Very nice.
Thank you, Lucy.
And nice to see familiar faces again.